The popularity of Formula One that you have here in the UK is what NASCAR is in the States. And just from a scaling purpose, NASCAR is probably 3 to 4 times the size of Formula One in the US. If you just look at the gross television numbers on any given weekend. So NASCAR is huge. Whenever I was relaxed and felt like my job was secure, I usually gave my worst performance. And so I had to find a way to create this like hunger and competitiveness. So I spent 2 years in IndyCar after 20 years in NASCAR. The grind of the NASCAR schedule had taken its toll on me, and that fire was fading. I wanted to try something different, and I didn't give a shit what anyone else thought. This was for me.
But before we dive in, if this is your first time on the channel, or if you're a regular viewer, please can you like, subscribe, and hit the bell. It allows us to keep delivering you amazing guests and, of course, create the best content. We thank you so much for your support, and time to get on with the show.
Jimmie, we are so excited to have you here. First, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
A couple of Brits sitting down talking to you about NASCAR is quite a funny concept.
I love it, man. And I walked here from the gym that I train in and live on the other side of the park. So who would think it? You know,
so
a NASCAR guy here in England.
So you made the move.
We did. We came over in, I guess, the summer of 23 for an adventure year. My wife and I always wanted to live abroad. We've traveled as much as my schedule would allow. And then we actually applied for a visa in 2020, hoping that 2021 it would work. But as it turns out, it's much more difficult to get a visa in this country than we ever imagined. And I hear it's quite complicated to get one in the States. So now I understand friends there that have gone through this. But we finally got in 23 and have had the best time. And 1 year's turned into 2. And we'll keep a presence, but I have to get back to the States. My business, the NASCAR team that I now control and majority owner of, requires a lot more time than living in England will allow me.
Can we just start? As a naive Brit, I'm not so familiar of what NASCAR really is. I've played the video games, but for anyone that doesn't know what NASCAR is,
Sure.
How do you describe it?
Yeah, I mean, it's racing, right? So the popularity of Formula One that you have here in the UK is what NASCAR is in the States. And just from a scaling purpose, NASCAR is probably 3 to 4 times the size of Formula One in the US. If you just look at the gross television numbers on any given weekend. NASCAR is huge. NFL is number 1 in TV. NASCAR Cup Series is 2nd. NASCAR Xfinity Series, which is our junior series, is 3rd. The next junior series is 4th. And then the NBA is 5th in television viewership annually. So, I mean, it's a big deal.
The NBA is 5th?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is that commensurate in the financial flows to the talent? Like, did NASCAR talent get paid for being in the top 1 to 4 versus the NBA?
No, and that's part of where our sport is evolving right now. And at the Cup level, which is the top tier, and where I've spent my career driving, there's a charter system that went into play 11 years ago. And that charter system has evolved, and we just had a new charter agreement pushed out. It's a 7-year agreement, and the terms have changed and in favor of the teams. You know, the teams would argue that not far enough. NASCAR would say that we came, further than we would have ever wanted to. But when you look in scale compared to the other stick and ball sports in the U.S., it's a great step forward, but not there. And just one example would be the U.S. media rights that we share in. We're sharing in 7% of those media rights for the first 11 years. And now the next 7 years, it's 29.5%. So a nice bump. But when you look at other stick and ball sports, the teams share in at least 50% of worldwide television rights. So there still is a lot of room to grow.
That's about an $8 billion deal, right, at the moment?
It is, yeah.
I just want to understand. So 29% is the new deal?
Yep.
And that's $8 billion?
Correct.
So how much does the NBA get then as a proportional representative?
I believe it's 50%.
50%?
Yes. I think the lowest.
How does that work? If they're 5th and you're the top 4, how do they get 50% and you get 28%?
So there are some big differences. We are not a league. The other sports entities are leagues. We're private contractors that have come in, and we don't necessarily have franchises, but we have charters. And so these charters are renewed, and the terms are renewed over the duration that is set forth.
Sorry, what really is a charter? It's not a league?
It's a right to
It's
own
a
a team,
right.
right?
It's a right to have a guaranteed starting spot in a race.
Okay.
And
So there's lots of individual charters.
correct. In a NASCAR event, 40 cars start every race. 36 of those starting positions are chartered cars. So you're guaranteed a starting spot. And then there's prize money that comes out for each individual race and also for the overall championship at the end of the year. And when the charter system was founded, the teams all agreed that it should not be top heavy. In order to make this system valuable, let's redistribute the funds. The top team should be able to find more commercial dollars, and let's spread this out through the bottom to really create value and a core product that is competitive on track.
And so a lot of the reference points may be Formula One because that's our stock. But does each team have 2 cars in a race, similar to F1?
No, we're a bit different, and it gets really confusing. And I think if NASCAR could start now with a clean sheet of paper, it would be less confusing. But you have all these grandfather issues that continue to trickle on. So where this comes into play is now if you are a new team owner, you can only have 3 charters. An existing team, there are a couple 4-car teams out there, and as long as that team stays in ownership of the current ownership, it's grandfathered in as a 4-car team. If it ever transacts, then it would have to move down to a 3-car team.
Wow. Okay. How many owners are there then right now?
There are 15 owners that occupy the 36 charters.
36 charters.
Yeah.
You said there are 40 cars that start. What about the other 4 cars?
They are the fastest 4 get in, and at most racetracks, there's really not that concern, but the Daytona 500 is one that's quite popular, kicks off our season, and I've been running a 3rd car occasionally, and at the Daytona 500 the last 3 years, I've had to make my way in on speed, race my way in, so that's been frightening. I've made it each year, but to go there without a guaranteed spot is a different environment.
And can you buy a guaranteed spot? Is that how it works?
You have to buy the charter, and there are some leasing opportunities where you can lease a charter for a year, but ultimately the goal is for ownership and to support the teams that commit to the sport, and then the demand is what's going to create the increase in enterprise value. And so when this first started, the teams that were with NASCAR from the beginning were gifted the charters. Our new high water mark is, I think, $40 million a charter. We had 3 charters transact at $40 million, and a few more since, but there were less assets attached. But now that we have our new charter agreement, I think you're going to see a 45, a 50, 55. The charters are going to continue to rise. And the NASCAR has some terms where if you meet certain competitive thresholds and at least committing the funds to your race team to have a credible car on track, you'll have an auto renewal.
How have the ownerships changed? Since you maybe started racing to now, have you started to see more of a profile of owner come in? Have they been really centralized around brands? How do they look?
Yeah, it's certainly changing. We're seeing a lot more private equity money come in, and that's something that I've just participated in recently myself. I came in as a minority owner in the fall of 2022. There was a team owner that's been in the sport for a long time and went racing because he and his son liked it, and he bought one of the early charters, and they're so valuable now. We got in this thing together and had fun with 2 charters for a couple of years, and then he wanted to exit. He was the founder of an airline in the U.S. called Allegiant Air, and he's in his late 70s and just a little change of pace in life and decided to exit. And at that point, I was trying to find the right strategic partner and landed on Knighthead Capital, a group out of New York. They actually do quite a bit of work here in England. They're the owners of the Birmingham City Football Club. They just purchased a cricket team. And so, they definitely see the value in sport. And as Tom Wagner, the founder, likes to call it, sport is the only analog experience left out there. Everything else has gone digital.
Is that Tom Brady's?
Yes, Tom Brady's partner, correct.
So is he part of this as well?
He is not directly involved with Legacy Motor Club, which is the team that I own, but Knighthead Capital is who he's partnered with as well.
How much do you buy it for?
Can't say just yet. It's there's a whole process that's going through, but it'll be a new high watermark for the sport.
And so when you buy the charter, you get the team behind it too. You have to build that. I'm just thinking about the financing that goes in beyond just buying the charter.
Correct. And our charters, Since I've come into Legacy Motor Club, we've been able to land a top tier OEM. So we have a tier 1 program with Toyota. In addition to that, we have 3 long-term partners that have come on. And so we're in year 1 or 2 of a 5-year contract. And so when our enterprise value, when we ran through the model, we have a lot more to offer than some other charters that traded recently in kind of a fire sale. Gene Haas, who owns the Haas F1 team, just kind of had enough of NASCAR and wants to exit. Some of his partners wanted to exit. There weren't any sponsorship or assets attached, and those transacted in the low 30s. But now, when you look at an operation like ours and these partnerships and sponsorships attached, enterprise value goes up.
How much do they tend to throw off then a year in sponsorships? And like, if we think about you buy it for 30, 40, 50, whatever it is, how much does a charter make in a year?
There are a lot of variables to control that, and it still is tough to yield a profit right now. I hope that in the next year or 2, it will continue to shift. And then certainly in 7 more years, there is another negotiation to take place with NASCAR to renew the charters once again. We continue to get closer. A lot of it really depends on your on-track performance. The better you finish, the more revenue you share in. There's 3 different buckets of revenue that you share in. And the better your averages are year over year, the better you finish after each race, the more cash you get.
So when we actually just break down the income streams, you've got prize money and performance.
Correct.
You got sponsorships. You got media rights.
Yes. Well, I would. So the media rights feed into your prize money, and so prize money, you have your annual year end and then race per race. So those guys are in one bucket. Then you have licensed merch. You have your sponsorship, and that's it. Those would be the 3.
Licensed merch. That's like caps.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool.
Do you have NASCAR Central who negotiates those deals that then filter down into the teams? Is there like a holding group that sits above?
No, NASCAR has its own strategy and negotiations that it handles. Because here's where it gets even more interesting. Is NASCAR not only owns the sport, but they also own half the tracks that we race at.
Wow, it's a real
And then
estate
we're
player.
now racing a spec car that NASCAR controls the vehicles and their production. That of all the vehicles that we have access to and buy, purchase, race, and use.
Wow, okay.
Whoa, how do I buy part of NASCAR? I don't want...
Privately owned, family owned, still today.
Really?
Wow.
The whole
Yes.
thing?
So maybe 5 minutes ago, we spoke about how we're not a league. And now as the layers of the onion pull back, you can see.
That is an astonishing family business.
Correct.
Real
Oh my
estate,
gosh, they own
arcade.
half of the tracks.
Yes.
And they sell a license for 40 million quid a pop. Genius.
So the evolution of our sport, and when you look at, golf may be a little different, but it's changing, right? It's changed quite a bit. I think the NBA maybe 5 to 7 years ago went through a transformation and became more of a league. And once the league understood that they needed to share more, that teams were more valuable and the players were more valuable, and the tide rose for everyone. It's happened in Formula One recently as Liberty Media bought it and invested more back into the sport, shared more. Now everything is worth more, and everyone is there's more of the pie to distribute and pass around. NASCAR is going through that process now. We're just early days.
Have you seen the demand rise for charters?
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. In which the easiest indicator is the value in the charters going up. And so first it started off with the existing team owners that were like, this is the sport we love, we're staying in it. Maybe someday we'll be able to have an asset here to sell. Then there was enough popularity that you had drivers thinking, man, I better get in here and buy something. This is my industry. I need to be a part of it. Otherwise, I can't afford it. And that ship has sailed for quite a few of the guys. I was kind of on the back end of that, if not in this next phase of, wow, this is really an asset and there are a lot of things trending the right way. Better get in. And I was able to get in, and now you have all this PE money getting in. And I predict that charters are going to start trading very soon in that 60 plus mark. And I don't know how, my world and industry related folks are going to be able to do that alone. It's going to evolve into big family investors or PE.
Is that a bubble? And what I mean by that is if they're not sustainable financial entities in themselves, and as you said, it's still tough to make it break even or profitable, and the asset price itself is soaring because the supply side of cash is increasing families, private equity, very successful drivers, but it's not actually yielding the returns. is it a good financial asset?
I believe it is. And I think it takes someone to understand the sport and be in it, and to understand the tentacles. And a great example would be either Roger Penske or Rick Hendrick. Both of them have massive auto conglomerates. When you look at their race cars on track, one has Pennzoil lubricants on it on track. Well, Mr. Penske makes sure that every auto center that he has around the world sells Pennzoil, and then in exchange for that, the car is paid for. And so there are creative B2B opportunities that really make sense and generate the opportunity. But outside of that, and that's the way this deal has transacted for so long. It is now on a point, though, where if you have a nice commercial offering and you have assets and you're willing to build a brand, I do believe there's real profitability. And I think that our team is one of two young teams with young owners that are really trying to push that. And it's fun to be on that cutting edge. And the more we talk about it, the more interest that is out there. Landed Nighthead, and they can see this vision and grasp it and understand it, and they have tentacles into sport everywhere. And there's, the snowball is starting to roll for us.
Great sport is built on competitive environments, right? And the opportunity to win and compete. Right. Is there a danger in NASCAR that you have an environment of whoever can spend the most, whoever the richest owner is, brings the most success?
That generation has just ended, and that was the generation of driving that I succeeded in. I drove for the guy that had the deepest wallets or deepest pockets, and had the greatest success with an unlimited budget. So I was able to win my seven.
Why did money buy success?
We weren't limited in resources, and so we chose to build everything. There were like 4 or 5 pieces on the car that we didn't manufacture ourselves because the rulebook stated that the engine block, the hood, the roof, and the boot, the trunk lid, had to be a manufactured part. Everything else was wide open. And so as Mr. Hendrick's been in business for 40 years and had parts and pieces fail, he just decided to build everything in-house. His machine shop, it had to be a 300,000 square foot building with hundreds of CNC machines building anything and everything, down to the heads for the engines, the valve springs. We were winding springs our own with these wild materials, like built everything, just crazy budgets like you would see in Formula One. Very much the same thing. That all ended with the advent of this spec car. And so now we have a spec car, which is kind of like a soft spending cap, because we can only buy a certain allotment of vehicles and parts and pieces through the course of the year. So we do have a soft cap, which is why I felt comfortable getting into the sport. I don't have deep pockets like Mr. Hendrick or Mr. Penske does, and I had to come into an environment that was going to be much more safe.
A huge amount of Formula One's growth now has been attributed to that cost cap because it's made them more competitive when it comes down to the car, but drivers' salaries have always sat outside of it. For this soft cap, is that purely based on what you can put into the technology rather
Correct.
than what you can spend outside of it?
Yeah, soft capped right now just includes, we call it the stuff that rusts, so race cars. There is a hard cap coming into play in 2027, and it's still being negotiated, but I would assume anything that promotes the sport would be excluded. And so our racing facilities are like museums, and so a facility would be out of that. Driver contracts would be out of it. But travel, I would say, your technology spend for wind tunnels, CFD.
Travel?
Yes. And so what happened, so much of this is reactionary. Back again in the era that I drove, money was plentiful. Every driver had their own private plane. Every team had their own fleet of private aircraft. The contracts have shrunk. And so now there are some legitimate charter services that are quite affordable, and teams aren't required to own their own aircraft and have their own hangar and their own flight crews. And it's really helped the bottom line because there's no way we can travel commercial.
Why can't you travel commercial?
Impossible.
Why?
Delayed flights, where we're going. And you think about our entire industry, everyone lives in Charlotte. So now you have a couple thousand people or 1,000 people. I don't even know what the numbers are, but you have 40 teams, 20 crew members per team. That's just the Sunday show. Then you have Saturday and Friday, plus all the NASCAR people, plus sponsors, press, everyone going to each track. There's just not enough commercial travel. The team, again, I drove for, we had 4 regional jets to move our people around. And those jets didn't sit still. They're busy moving people 3 days a week.
4 regional jets?
Correct.
How often do you race?
You're going to love this one. 38 races within 39 weeks is our schedule. Start in February and in November. 1 off week.
Now I get
Huge.
that. Yeah.
Correct.
Like 10 grand an hour minimum for a PJ.
Yeah. Yeah.
God, they had deep pockets.
There was so much money in the sport at the time. Now everything's contracted, and it's actually been nice because we can see.
Is it nice or is it a bit less fun?
I wouldn't be an owner if it wasn't where it is now. There's no way I could have played the game before.
Would you be a driver?
Yeah, maybe would have hung on a few more years.
So do the drivers get paid more now or less now?
Less.
Then? They get paid less now?
For sure.
That's weird.
Yeah.
The sport has grown and they get paid less.
Yeah, it's just reflective of contract cycles. And also, the workload is a bit less. There are many cost savings have been put into play, and we spoke about a few of them so far. Another one is that the OEMs control the technology. So NASCAR will allow each OEM to have 3 test sessions during the course of the year. The OEMs also control the wind tunnel time. The OEMs also control the tire test and development time that's allotted. All of that in the past was any team could do it on their own and at will. And so during my generation of driving, not only did, I drove for a 4-car team at Hendrick Motorsports. My car, the 48 car, we had our own test team. So we would be gone at a racetrack from Thursday to Sunday racing, home Sunday night, leave Monday night for a test session. I was on track again with the test team Tuesday, Wednesday, back home to change the bags on Thursday, leave Thursday night for the next race. I had 22 test sessions in between my 38 weekends of racing. And so again, all these expenses, now all that's gone. The OEM controls all the testing. We're given data, and then we go into our simulators and our simulation, and our engineers try to take that data and apply it and build speed.
So for a driver contract now, let's say you look at, again, top Formula One contracts, they're like 60 million a year, I think, for Max Verstappen, but they'll go down to $500,000 a year for rookies. Is there that disparity between those in NASCAR?
I don't think the disparity is quite as bad. I would say in the peak, you all in, ticking every box if you won the championship and high merch sales and all the avenues, I would say a top cup driver would take in 40 million. Now I would say it's probably 13 million, 15 million, depending on the year.
That's a lot.
It's been a big contraction.
You're not moaning, but that's a lot less.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then the lower end would be?
I think most guys probably can make $1 million a year.
Wow.
Yeah. But you also so that driver contract does reflect the overall spend for the year and the money raised. So there's been a lot of cost savings put into play. And now there is, again, this demand and more popularity than there's ever been for the sport.
Maybe football could learn from this.
Can I ask a cheeky question?
Go for it.
What was your best year?
I was in that upper number.
That's more of an answer than you normally get.
That's pretty good.
It's pretty good. It's pretty
I'd
good.
take it, yeah.
I was very, very fortunate. My timing as a driver, which I had nothing to do with, but I was able to I won 5 in a row during the peak earning years, man. It was good.
Where do drivers sit on like that, should we say celebrity or icon or sporting character status in the US? If you've got the thing that's like second most watched, but obviously we know loads of NBA profiles here, but we wouldn't know many NASCAR drivers. What's the kind of celebrity status of drivers?
Yeah, I think it's quite high. I mean, we have an interesting job career where we have great name recognition, but not facial recognition.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
You can book a restaurant, but you're not fucked when you get inside.
Completely right. 1,000%. And when you think of other stick and ball guys, especially like American football or NBA, they're such big humans that they stand out and you're like, that's got to be someone. And then people chase them down. Where race car guys, we just look like normal people and it's quite simple. But, I'd say during the height of it all, Jeff Gordon and Dale Earnhardt Sr. had crazy recognition. The rivalry that they had between the two, you had the California kid dethroning the Southern man and Dale Sr., and that was really kind of late 90s, early 2000s was massive.
I think we're getting into this late, but I think it's important the audience, particularly the UK one, understands that you're 7-time winner. That is similar in terms of records as a Michael Schumacher and Lewis Hamilton for the Formula One side. Like, that is an incredible set of achievements. How did you actually get into the sport?
I grew up in Southern California. I grew up racing motocross. My grandparents owned a motorcycle store, and my dad ran the service department for them. And as I was a kid coming along, my Dad would spend his weekends at the tracks helping clients. And then before we knew it, I had a bike to ride. My mom would run the snack bar. And that was kind of our life. 2 younger brothers that both have been in and around racing, but I had more breaks than they did. And it's somewhere there in kind of my mid to late teens, I was able to transition to 4 wheels and started racing off-road buggies and then off-road trucks. And so in the US, you have a big outdoor racing series that has the Baja 1000, which you may have heard of. There's also some indoor stadium off-road racing. And in that little world, I was spotted by the folks at Chevrolet, and they guided my career from when I was 16 up until recently.
Quite a lot of motorsport gets critiqued for being quite elitist in the opportunities. It's very hard to access unless you have money and finances. Was that the same with NASCAR?
No, and I don't even think it's that way for Formula One per se. It is once you decide to make it your chosen profession and you want to climb the ranks. But as an entry point, racetracks around the world, you have blue-collar families where the father's mechanically inclined, and it's something that the father looks after and maintenances the go-kart or the vehicle during the week, and on the weekends the family heads over to the track and goes racing.
So the cost of entry isn't steep enough to stop anyone from getting involved?
I think initially it is more about the mechanical aspect that puts parents off than it is the financial piece, because my family didn't. My mom was a school bus driver, and my dad worked in the motorcycle shop, and then was a heavy equipment operator and drove a tractor. And so he made things work, but he had to work on it himself, and that's probably the part I think initially. And as you get more serious, yes, it costs money. There's no way around it. It's not like having a basketball in the backyard and a hoop and you shoot, or a football and you kick it around. So it's kind of a mixed bag.
In terms of sponsors, what does that look like? You said there got Pennzoil. Yeah.
So for us, we have different sponsors. That was an example for Mr. Penske. But for us, one of our major partners is Toyota. We have Family Dollar, which would be maybe like Pound Town. Is it Pound Town? What do you guys call it here?
Pound Shop.
Pound Shop.
Poundland.
Poundland?
Poundland.
Which in the States, that term is just hilarious.
What?
Pound. Never mind.
Poundland. I see.
Not everything is also a pound.
I see the naughty side of it. Yeah.
So Family Dollar.
Most of it is not a pound.
It's cheese.
It's not a pound.
It's like, hey,
and that's the same thing with the company that sponsors us, Dollar Tree Family Dollar, is the same thing. It's budget shopping, but it's not $1 for everything that's in the store.
What's it called? Dollar
Tree. There's two businesses under one roof, and it's Dollar Tree and then Family Dollar are their 2 businesses.
Again, unlike a team having a set sponsorship, I saw someone describe it when I was looking at stuff before this. It's like a rolling billboard. Things can change really quickly. So you can have like new sponsors in 2 weeks' time.
Absolutely. When I was driving full time, it was very common to have one sponsor pick up everything. Now it is more common to have a 5 to 7 race schedule with a given sponsor. And so it creates some vibrancy at the track and new opportunities, and I think more comms for us in more content for us to push out, although it's put a big burden in a lot of work on our marketing department, sales department to pull it all off.
Is it better money or worse money doing the more frequent changes?
It's turned out to be slightly better. Once you staff up and get it efficient, it's probably single digit better. Initially, we thought maybe double digit, but once you have to staff up correctly, it's back down to single digit.
Is that a good investment for them? Like, you got to sell a lot of dollar goods to make back. Generally speaking, is it like a $5 million, $10 million to sponsor a team? How much?
I would say the going rate for a large primary is that 10 to 12 range.
10 to 12 million.
10 to 12 million. Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
Is that a brand play then for them?
It is, and they're a national brand, so they want that exposure and and saturation across the country. Now, to scale it, when I think back to my days I had Lowe's Home Improvement as a sponsor. They were spending $35 million a year back in the day. So again, yes, on our team.
Wow. Did you go home to your wife and say, I'm the $35 million man?
Mr. Hendrick did. He owned the team. I negotiated like hell to get as much of that as I could, but it just... Again, referring back to like the early 2000s where we had the peak of money in the sport, everything's contracted and it's down to a different place. But there's still great opportunity, and I think the opportunity is still growing.
When you were winning, you said you won 5 in a row. How was that? Did that impact the business of the team that you were driving for?
Certainly. We had there were kickers in the contract for certain performance initiatives that were met. And then we also had a renegotiation. Fortunately fell in the middle in there and allowed us to continue to change it again. So we tapped out on everything we could in there.
How was it for you on the side? Quite often dominance in sport isn't necessarily received really well. Did that become a problem if you continue to win?
Yeah, I think it worked against me. And from total fan popularity and transcending the sport like some other names, I took my job very seriously. I trained like an animal at a very polished, straightforward approach, always took the high road even when I had to bite my tongue and it was difficult. And I was labeled vanilla, a corporate robot, all these other elements. Some people said I was too nice or I was too good, and I found a lot of it to be complimentary. So I just kind of smiled and just kept going on about myself.
The business of the individual now is such an important thing we talk about, the celebration of like athletes and brand. When you were driving, were you in the social media era? Were you in the opportunity to build your own platform?
I was. A portion of my career was, yeah. And I activated in all those areas. We put content out. But again, it was predictable and straightforward. And I don't know, I was just raised, work hard, play hard, and maybe don't let your sponsors see how hard you play. And I just made sure that I kept doing that as I went through life.
We share the same ethos. Without sponsors, prize money, because I'm like consistently shocked by these numbers. Prize money, what do you get if you win?
Yeah, I think if you have a big year, you can take that 30-30-30 and make it maybe 45 in prize money, in the prize money bucket. So you can significantly change the bottom line.
So the year when you're crushing, 7 years when you're crushing, what's the prize money that the team gets for winning a race?
During that era, we weren't in the franchised charter system, so it was much different. And the prize money would change from race to race. In an event like the Daytona 500, to be the winner of it, I think it was like almost $2 million to win that one race.
Wow.
And now they've taken that prize money that was shared across all 38 races, pushed it all together, and then redistributed it and loaded the bottom half so that these smaller teams that have less commercial appeal can stay in the sport, have nice equipment, have competitive equipment, and be in it. But what's interesting is the better you do, not only the more prize money in this existing system do you raise, but the more commercial potential you have. And then your rate card and the rate in which you sell your sponsorship for each individual opportunity and sticker on the car continues to tick up. And so as you pull yourself up into a tier 1 program, which we're not in yet, we see a pathway to profitability in our 3rd year of existence, which isn't bad for a startup organization.
The licensed merch side, what does that look like? People just buying hats? How's that 30% when we look at the others being such large numbers?
So the licensed merch thing is probably not 30%. Back when I first started, it was. Where it is today, it's interesting how it's compressed and it isn't as rampant as it once was.
Why is that, do you think?
There's so many factors in play which we can't quite get our arms around. And when I first started, granted I was a rookie, but I made more money in licensed souvenir sales than I did in driving the car. And then call it 2010, 12, somewhere in there, it flipped and started going the other way. And the fans are still there. Our numbers are still up. I don't understand why.
So the consumer spend is down.
Consumer spend is down on that stuff.
And that stuff is pens and hats and jackets and T-shirts, that sort of thing?
Correct. Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
That's so interesting.
Is the profile of your consumers, when it comes down to that, a concern? People seem to think it's an aging demographic. It's not necessarily speaking to the young audience who are now so commercially important to sport.
There is that argument. Our stats would show that a lot of the changes NASCAR has made to the format, a variety of other changes in race venues and markets and promotion have shifted that. And we actually have a robust 18 to 24 market now, which is diverse, which is great, not only race, but also gender. So there's a lot of effort and energy being put into it, and it's making a difference.
How well's the Netflix series done for NASCAR in elevating that profile further?
I think it's been great. I think it's been less impactful in the States, maybe, and more impactful abroad. Just like Drive to Survive was more impactful for the States and fans that weren't aware of and knew of Formula One.
Amazing.
And maybe less in Europe where it's popular. But yeah, people just love to watch train wreck and love to see behind the scenes. So it's been great.
Has the rise of Formula One in the US been a problem for NASCAR?
No, it's only been better. The motorsports is not a niche sport, but the success of one helps the other, without a doubt. The popularity, the interest, the fandom, the cool factor around fast cars and going to these events, it helps all, absolutely.
How important are engineers when it comes down to those cars?
Every bit of it.
So your engineering team is seen as like the highly valuable competitive asset, just like it is again in other races.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's 80% of our
Really?
Our makeup. Right now we have 135 employees and 80 of them are engineers. 80%.
135 employees in your team?
For 2 full-time cars, yeah.
Wow.
Yep.
And 80% are engineers?
Correct.
Fuck. Wow.
Lots of overhead.
Good car, good driver. What's more important?
Man, I'll take a good driver any day. They just see things differently, think differently, can lead the team differently. There's just long-term sustainability in a good driver.
Like
a good car, they come and go, unfortunately, right? Like, it's just part of the engineering journey.
Do you think that's the same in F1?
I do. Those same names continue to just march on.
You moved races, right? So you moved across motorsports.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
How feasible is it? How different is it when you're sitting in NASCAR and then you go and race in IndyCar?
It is such a different discipline, and I think you just need enough time for a fair evaluation. So I spent 2 years in IndyCar after 20 years in NASCAR.
Well, you're just like, I won it all.
I've
Fuck that. Who cares about number 8?
No, just try and win.
I chased 8.
Seriously, you're just like, oh, done it.
I chased it, but the grind of the NASCAR schedule had taken its toll on me, and that fire was fading. That burning fire was fading. And I always wanted to be a single seat driver. That was my ambition as a kid. I didn't know of NASCAR growing up on the West Coast of the States. It was IndyCar. And Rick Mears and Mario Andretti, all these other names were my heroes growing up. So I had a chance to go IndyCar racing, and I took it in 21 and 22. And by the end of 22, I could run 12th to 15th on a street or road course in an IndyCar race. So, I mean, I got into the mix. The ovals, I would race up at the front and did fine. But again, it just got to a point where it became
Was that challenging for the ego? Like,
no, because my
7-time winner, and then you're like, not winning.
My give a shit meter was broken at that point. Like
I'm not surprised after the 40 million years. I'll be in Portofino, baby.
What other people thought, I could have cared less, but I still went to Portofino for that one off weekend and had a blast. Or Capri or wherever it might have been, Wonderful places. But I wanted to try something different, and I didn't give a shit what anyone else thought. This was for me, and I always wanted to be in that next level of high performance vehicle, and so the IndyCar really was that that opportunity.
How difficult is it to drive? Are they really different cars?
Completely backwards. The best way to describe it, when you have an oh shit moment, like you have a default wiring how to save yourself in racing. You just do. And the default wiring in IndyCar versus NASCAR are complete opposites. So when you get into that oh shit moment in either car and you respond and try to save yourself, you just make it worse and you crash. And so I had to work through that whole process in IndyCar for the 2 years and finally got it right.
I'm so sorry. I didn't even have a driver's license. So you're going to be like, oh my God. Yeah, I know. We didn't need one in London. But how are they different?
So the easiest way to describe it is a Formula car creates its performance based on airspeed over the vehicle. A NASCAR vehicle, the shape and body of all of the aerodynamic properties do not provide the grip. It's more mechanical grip. It's the tire and the springs and the shocks on the car. And so when you're in
it's the feel of it.
There's a feel and a commitment that in braking technique and techniques in general, where in a Formula car, when in doubt, go faster, and 9 times out of 10 it's better. In a NASCAR vehicle, when you have a moment, slow down. Like you've crossed over the level of available mechanical grip. You have to pull it back.
What was your biggest oh shit moment?
Man, I had a bunch of them. I'd say the biggest one that did not turn into an underwear change moment was qualifying for the Indy 500. I knew the car was geared to run 246 miles an hour, and I turned into turn one and hit the hard rev limiter, so I knew I was doing 246, and had a moment and lost it into the corner, and I gathered it up like a mil from the wall and didn't hit the wall.
Are you dead at that point?
No, not. It depends. There's a lot of things that need to go wrong in today's racing for that to happen. But ultimately, there is a scenario in some mods for yes, but certainly bruised up and hurt.
So is safety now pretty good around both disciplines?
Yes, very, very, very good. Yeah.
You said about high performance there, and you said something earlier which I wrote down because it really just resonated with me. You said you trained like an animal. What did that mean? Like, what was involved in training like an animal?
For me, whenever I was relaxed and felt like my job was secure, I usually gave my worst performance. And so I had to find a way to create this like hunger and competitiveness. And the leader of my specific team, the 48 car that I drove, he became like a brother to me. And he knew how to push my buttons and keep me honest. And through that evolution, I also found that triathlon and competing in either 5Ks or half marathons, triathlon would keep that competitive thing going for me and keep me honest and created a level of accountability. And I was never comfortable.
What's the ideal physique? Rosberg, when we did a show with Nico Rosberg, he said when he got to the stage where every gram that he had on him mattered. And so he stopped cycling because he actually needed to reduce the weight in his... He changed the paint on his helmet.
Yeah.
So it was 80 grams lighter because it made him go quicker. The differences in NASCAR, are they that specific as well?
Maybe not as specific. You know, the gross total weight of the vehicle is so much more. And in our racing, the majority are on ovals. And where the driver's positioned, you're going to put ballast right in that area as well. So it's not as important. And I also think during that generation of driving, the body weight of the driver was not factored into the gross total weight of the car. So literally every ounce you were carrying was a penalty.
Really?
Yeah. And Formula Racing changed that. And I can't recall exactly when. I know in IndyCar, it's when Danica Patrick came along, because she's a mighty little strong thing that could hang onto the steering wheel. There's no power steering in those cars, but she's 5'2" and small. And you'd have somebody like Graham Rahal, who's 6'2" or something, just a big dude. And he's carrying another 100 pounds, 50-something kilos around. And she had a massive advantage. So then they started making sure that the car did include the driver weight.
Have you ever driven a Formula One car?
I did. I tested for McLaren in Bahrain in 2018. And actually, that's where I met Nico, was at the race in Abu Dhabi beforehand. I did his podcast, and then I was on my way to Bahrain the following day to drive.
Oh, good to see you stepping up.
That was so fun.
In the podcast world.
Yeah. That too.
Was it really different? Like, because your cars are much higher, right?
Oh, everything about it was different.
So being that close to the ground, did that completely change your whole perspective?
The clutch was on the steering wheel. I was used to a foot clutch, and now I've got to use my pinky finger, which you don't realize the lack of dexterity that you have with your pinky finger until you're supposed to use it. Like, I was so clumsy and kept stalling the car. Open cockpit. I'd never been in an open cockpit vehicle, and it was wild.
Can I ask, one thing that I get so much now doing Business of Sport is I get so many athletes in DMs who are thinking about financial planning for a life post the sport, post their career. When you were winning 7 championships, how was your mindset towards finance preservation post-career?
It really was preservation focused. I think looking back on it now, I would tell myself to do it a little bit differently.
What would you tell yourself to do differently?
I feel like I made some acquisitions in personal real estate that I thought would do better in time. And maybe I had to sell it. I needed to sell at different times, but an apartment in New York and some other residential places that I thought, man, I love to be here. And I think that prices are going to go up and I'm going to buy this place and hang on to it and then flip it at some point. But when you really factor in the carrying costs and taxes and all this stuff at the end of the day, I had a low yield on parking a fair amount of money in one place for a long time. And I think there was more potential there if I kind of kept a smaller footprint and allocated those funds to more traditional investments.
But now you've pivoted and you've gone like, right, okay, I'm going to get back into NASCAR's like ownership side. How did you get into that? We were talking before and you were saying it was a real IP play for you and there was a value opportunity there. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, when I went IndyCar racing, I finally realized my brand's value. I drove for the biggest team in NASCAR and of course knew we commanded a lot, but myself personally making phone calls and trying to find sponsorship for the IndyCar. In 8 days, I was able to land a sponsor in Carvana, which is a company that sells used cars in the States. And in 8 days, we had our deal put together.
And so you realized the weight of your phone call and you signed them in 8 days.
Correct. The weight of the phone call, that led to a potential opportunity in owning the IndyCar that I was driving at Chip Ganassi Racing. Like, man, if I'm going to get into this, IndyCar doesn't have a charter system. Maybe I need to go back home to NASCAR. And then I found the opportunity I did to join, which was Petty GMS. And so my former partner, Maury Gallagher, bought Richard Petty's IP and racing operations. And there are 3 7-time champions in NASCAR, myself, Richard Petty, and then the late Dale Earnhardt Sr. And so at Legacy Motor Club, we have 2 7-time champions that are kind of the foundational piece of it. And we're trying to build a lifestyle motorsports brand on top of that, moving into other championships, expanding first of all, within NASCAR, but then into other championships as well as time goes on.
What does that look like? Sorry, so expanding into other championships, a lifestyle brand around it. What does that actually mean?
The popularity of motorsport worldwide is it's going through a moment. I don't know how long it's going to last, but when you look around at the amount of amateur racetracks being built and the auto enthusiast and their spend on high performance vehicles, it's unlike anything that's ever happened before. And so many people have these amazing cars in their garages and nowhere to drive them. And so you're seeing these tracks come to life, and these tracks are turning into country clubs. And there is a moment here for us to use our competitive spirits and accolades on track to tap into a bigger audience and build a lifestyle brand and create offerings and experiences for people.
The thing I just don't understand is, like, consumers have finite wallets, yeah, and they are not really expanding, as we're seeing in recessions in multiple different countries around the world, a contraction in consumer spend. But Taylor Swift's concerts sell out faster than ever. There is fandom for pop stars, sports teams like never before. When we are seeing more and more dollars allocated towards NASCAR and NFL Super Bowls and Taylor Swift concerts, who's on the other end of that? Who are the losers? I can't figure this out. Is it MLB? Is it cinema?
I haven't thought of it in that perspective, and it's coming from somewhere. But my first response is the rich have gotten so much richer. That top 1% continues to just pull away from the rest at a rate that's not been done before. And the spending in there, especially in this world that I see such an opportunity in motorsport, and these guys that are collecting these cars and need a cool track to drive them on. And then, let me bring Richard Petty and Jimmie Johnson and whoever else out to the track and spend a day with you and create an experience. For that, the spending's crazy right now.
But your 100,000 that's turned out on the weekend, right? They're still going to drive the sport, and they're not what you would class as the rich.
Correct.
Right? So they're still choosing to spend their money here, not put it elsewhere.
How much do you pay to go to one of the races?
It depends on track, venue, different elements, but the big shows are just as expensive as going to a Super Bowl. I mean, it's the same thing.
Well, like, and a Super Bowl is like $500.
I've never bought a ticket to go, so I don't know.
Hundreds of dollars. It's not.
Wow.
It's not $30.
That's expensive.
Yeah.
Wow. And who gets the ticket revenue? Because in sports, and we spend a lot of time, say, football, cricket, or rugby even. Or rugby
what
even.
Tickets?
But like, ticket revenue is an important part of their business. Who gets the NASCAR ticket revenue?
The track owner, which NASCAR owns half the tracks. And there's another group called Speedway Motorsports Incorporated, and they own the other half the tracks.
Wow. Who owns Speedway?
Let's see, it's the Smith family. Bruton Smith founded it, and his family runs it. So there's three sons and a grandson waiting in the wings. But great family, NASCAR family. They're lovely people. I mean, they've just created a juggernaut, and good on them.
Could you take NASCAR global based on the facilities that exist in other countries at the moment?
You could now. So both track groups I just spoke about were publicly traded 5-8 years ago. The families took them back private. And since that time, they have been taking off tracks that were underperforming and moving to new markets and even to tracks that they didn't own. So this year we're going to Mexico City for the first championship points paying event for the top series ever. It took one of the races to Chicago. There's a street circuit in downtown Chicago. So as we look forward, and there's some rumors about NASCAR someday selling a portion off and becoming more of a league. And we're all waiting and think that there's a real potential there. And as we become a league, that's when all ships in the harbor, I think, will rise more.
I'm going to say it because you probably can't. As great as it is to have two families like this, it feels like an antiquated structure for a new age of media and a new age of sport.
Correct. It is antiquated, and there's not enough transparency to negotiate in arm wrestle over terms. And again, back to the TV viewership numbers, I believe we are so undervalued. And granted, you cannot directly compare us to the NBA. We don't have a stadium that half of our races are in, and that is an asset for our valuation. But they trade in the billions. We're trading at 40 million right now. There's a long way for the sport to go.
How do you change it?
I think it's a slow evolution, and I think a lot of the heavy lifting's been done. We've weathered an 11-year charter system, just had a renewal that went from 7% to 29%. In another 7 years, it opens back up for negotiations again. And on top of that, we have a litigation taking place, which I'm not sure if you guys have heard about. We can spend another 2 hours discussing. But 2 teams of the 15 decided to not sign the new charter. So Michael Jordan owns a NASCAR team. And then there's another gentleman, it's called Front Row Motorsports, that decided to not sign. And they're claiming antitrust. And so that litigation is bouncing around right now. And
I'm sorry, what's that problem?
A lot of different things have been discussed, but ultimately the way the ownership group was asked to sign the contract on a particular day at a particular time has sent this into an antitrust lawsuit.
Are the teams at odds with the governance of NASCAR?
Governance from at track on the competition side, no. Governance of how funds are allocated, yes.
Okay. So
and just in any negotiation. So in the more I dig in, the more I understand this just happened in Formula One. This happened not long ago in the NBA. And I just think we're following the same trajectory where it's going to become a proper league and it has to evolve.
So is private equity the salvation then for NASCAR in the same way that some would say it was with the transition of ownership from Bernie Ecclestone to Liberty Media?
That's the way I see it, yes.
But I don't know if it has to be hostile in a way because, to break the structure, it's so difficult. It's so entrenched in what this sport is, and you almost need everyone to get on the page.
That's the thing. Nobody's going to willingly just give up large sums of money. Yeah. And there was a process, and we had higher expectations. We thought we were going to be more around the 50% mark. And then as the negotiations continued on, it seemed like every time the teams negotiated with NASCAR, there was less offered, and we negotiated our way down from around 50% to 29.5%.
Also, if they have the real estate, they kind of own you. I mean, they really own you.
You need to start making your own.
Yeah.
Venues. But what good are their tracks without?
There were a lot of discussions around countermeasures, and if the charters were pulled, does NASCAR start their own series because they provide the cars as well? And do they pull the charters and then sell them to, essentially no-name people? So the teams are like, there's no way they're going to succeed if they don't have the stars to go and be there. So there were discussions of, wow, if NASCAR hit the nuclear button, it would go this direction, and then the teams would have to go in this direction. And so the other half of the tracks that are out there aren't owned by NASCAR, and you would think that if the nuclear buttons were depressed, the popular teams and drivers could go race on the other tracks that are out there. But fortunately, we never got to that.
It's so interesting that it seems like there's this fundamentally huge tension, but actually you both realize the power that you both have, so none of you are willing to press the nuclear buttons.
Correct. Or better, two did essentially. You have the...
And what happened to them?
They're still trying to... they keep... Well, let's see.
Are they racing though every week or not?
They are racing every week, and they are trying to make sure that they can race within the charter system until a ruling is made, because it's going to take ages for this thing to play out.
I'm guessing the fact is Michael Jordan's team as well. It's pretty bad PR for NASCAR. They can't be happy that one of the real high profile.
Yes.
athletes in this.
But
is
what's
taking
wild is so far the argument over if they can compete under the charter has occupied probably 8 months in time. And one ruling is in favor of the teams, the next one's in favor of NASCAR, and then it's back to the teams. And they just keep delaying the process or the litigation that still needs to take place.
Do the teams speak to each other? Like, is there any chance here for like class action movement? Do the rebels all try and get everyone on side? I mean, how does that?
You would think, and there, as we talk to our lawyers and say, like, how does this play out? Every week it seems to evolve and change, but it seems that a lengthy litigation would be quite expensive and not make any sense. And then does NASCAR really want everything that's been held in private for so many years to be revealed and what they're earning? So there is some logic around a mediation, but I have no inside information or know if that's really what will happen.
If I gave you a magic wand and you could change one thing about the current structure of NASCAR, governance, you name it, what would you change?
I think for me, it would be the revenue share needs to encapsulate more of the entire business. Right now, the race winnings and the championship winnings, and then there's a third category that comes in that is a 3-year average. And so those 3 revenue streams are funded by U.S. media rights only. That's it. Not track sales, not sponsorship that NASCAR earns, not new monies that are developed, gambling in general, international rights. We know that there are races
so
on
that segment is all split off for the families.
One thing only, U.S. TV rights. And that's kind of the core of the thing. Like, we know our sport is more than that. We want to share in all of these things.
Wow. That's incredible that they've segmented those off as a separate revenue stream and then just include the media rights.
Yep.
Look,
we're private contractors. We understand the terms. We've signed the charter, the contract, and again, it went from 7 to 20. So it's directionally going right. We have cost caps coming in, popularity of sports going up. I think for me, if I didn't get in now and I didn't have the partners that can also see this, not only from Nighthead and their involvement to our corporate sponsors on the cars, the sport is really on a rise and there's a lot moving in the right direction. And the possibilities are massive. The opportunities are massive for the sport.
Wow. Quick fire? That's amazing. My mind has been blown in so many different ways on this. I'm still so shocked by the travel. Fucking nuts.
It's nuts.
4 regional jets.
Yeah.
Per team.
What?
Per charter.
Yeah. We got to move 20 people per car number. So for us right now, that's 40. And then we hope to expand to a third charter. So that's 60 people every weekend got to get to and from. Whoa. Yep.
And so you literally own those jets though?
The team I drove for did, yes, Hendrick Motorsports. We're now using this charter system. There are 17 regional jets that are in the area and that service the NASCAR industry. So whoever owns that business is probably doing great.
Yeah, the chartering business is a great business. What can F1 learn from NASCAR and vice versa?
I think that NASCAR needs to learn how to put on a better event, and the times in and around the race itself can be cooler.
Is there much experience to a NASCAR?
Depends on the venue. Bigger markets, yes. So you have 4 to 6 races that offer that, and then the rest, it's missing that element. And a lot of the corporate dollars that are on those race cars come because of the access that you cannot experience anywhere else. The access that you receive to go to one of these events, and you're in at an F1 race, rubbing shoulders with people that you can't get to otherwise. And so the investment in the way, I'm not corporate America, but worldwide corporate entities are paying to be on those race cars, paying to be a part of that hospitality so they can be in that room. That needs to happen in NASCAR for it to grow next.
What have you found out as an owner that you didn't know as a driver?
Just how much damn work it is. I was the athlete, man. I had the best job, the least amount of hours required, and the biggest pay.
Where is the work?
So wait.
So I've gone to the flip side of it.
So you've increased your workload, you decreased your pay.
Yeah.
And probably increased your time required.
Correct.
Sounds like a good deal.
Where's the
I'm
work?
an idiot. I did not have a real job for 49 years of my life, and now I have a fucking job. I'm an idiot.
Where's the
loving it.
workload in being an owner?
I'm trying to find my way in that space. I'm I felt like with my years as the driver, I would be very focused on the competition department of our racing operations. But our biggest problem has been revenue. And as I learned in that experience finding Carvana, if I make a phone call, I can get to a C-staff person in 1 or 2 calls. If I have our sales team do it, they're going to land in the middle somewhere, and who knows if we ever get there. And so from a revenue standpoint, on the business side of the house, that's where I've spent all my time. So I've not spent time where I thought I would, and it's been much more about flying to places and being with people. In person is way better than being on a Zoom or on a phone call, but just constantly working the lines, emails, text, phone calls, flying somewhere, face-to-face, building relationships.
I had one here, which was if you were started out driving today, how would your experience be different? But I think
it'd be poorer.
It'd be poorer. I'd travel commercial. I wouldn't.
I would say honestly though, it's growing up in a home simulator.
Really,
all championships are allowing the teams less and less track time if it's on a race weekend or the time in between races to reduce costs. But there's very little governance on simulation and simulators. So it's moving that way, and trying to bridge the virtual world to the real world is tough. And my generation of driver does not do a good job with it. These younger kids that grow up on these gaming consoles and then drive the real car
How similar
are incredible.
Are they?
Visually, very, very, I mean, like spot on. But from the cueing and the feedback in the car and how you make your little microsecond decisions, it's been tough for me to figure that part out.
Did you like have a sleep routine the night before? Because whenever you have like big athletes, like before the big Daytona race, did you have routines, sleep patterns, times of going to bed, breakfast cycles? What did that look like?
Yeah, as I mentioned, the training like an animal bit, that all built in a schedule that just made it simple for me. I've always had a tough time sleeping or staying asleep. And through training, I found if I finally exhausted myself, I would knock off and get enough sleep. And so hydration, diet, training, all of that. And I would try to treat each week as a way to where my peak fitness would hit on Sunday. And so recover on Monday. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday were pretty tough days, and then a bit of tapering and letting the body recover and sleep.
Tough days, so you're in the gym style, you're running, you're doing weights?
All of it. All of it. So for me, I felt like it was most effective cycling, doing the long rides. My body was better conditioned for the heat that we experience in the cars and the mental strength required to stay tuned in. And so cycling was one of the best things. Races average 4 hours. Some tracks are more physical than others.
Do you lose a lot of weight and sweat?
If you do, you're in trouble. But yeah, just got to drink that much more.
Do you drink during the race?
Yeah. We have an in-car drinking system, and then they hand in bottles as well.
Wow.
3-liter in-car system, and then grab a bottle or two as you go.
Wow.
Most of the force.
You don't ever eat, do you? It's not like a drive-through, like an In-N-Out.
No, I had
I'll have fries, please.
I had a little door pocket, and I would put Cliff Bars in it. And so we'd pre-open the Cliff Bars, and you couldn't have chocolate because you just make a hell of a mess with it. But I'd eat 2 to 3 Cliff Bars a race, a couple gels, and then I also had calories in my fluids.
Most of the force physically on your neck, was it your head having to take the brunt of it?
Yeah, NASCAR wise, you have all the left-hand turns, so you can build a head and neck system to support that. But road course racing, you can't have that same system. Right. And so we have 6 road courses, but the rest are just ovals and lefts, so you can support yourself quite
That must be really weird, wasn't it, when you first had to turn right?
Totally. Yeah. Just to make a funny remark out of this, I've spent my whole life going left, and when I hit a golf ball, it goes screaming right. So it's trying to balance me out.
Yeah. Amazing.
I love that.
The wild thing with NASCAR that people can't quite see is, you're at, these high speeds, and yes, you're turning left, but every time you turn the steering wheel, you're putting drag or resistance in the car itself and slowing it down. And so the optimum way to drive the car is where you're actually turning right, catching it. So the car is in a bit of a drift around the entire turn. And in order to manage that and the horsepower that the vehicles have, it's really quite interesting and fun to sit there and just dirt track a car around and slide it around these circuits for 4 hours at a time.
Which corporate sponsor do you not have that you'd love to have?
Man, I would probably say I'd say my favorite beverage, which is Coke.
Wow.
Do they do
full fat Coke?
Full fat Coke. Yeah.
Wow.
And I only like them when I'm hungover, but it's like the best. I call it a red ambulance. It's the best.
That's a great side.
A worldwide.
I love Jimmy. In a world of like Brian Johnson and Don't Die, he's like, I call it the red ambulance. Like, it's my hangover drink. I'm like, your whoop scores in the drink.
It is. It totally is. That's why I don't wear it on that day.
I put it
Actually,
on when I'm on my...
I got pissed off at my sleep. I wear the Oura ring, and it just gives me bad news.
Yeah.
Even when I feel like I slept well and I wake up and I'm like, oh, I can't wait to see my score. And I see it and it's like, you slept like shit. I'm like, well, you just ruined my day.
Yeah, and then you actually train differently because you're like, well, it says I'm tired, so I'll go easy.
Yeah.
No, I totally agree.
Stop wearing them.
Yeah, I did stop wearing them. Do you stop wearing yours?
Yeah. Just have
Yeah.
this. The Apple
Yeah, the
Watch. The
Apple
Apple
Watch,
Watch is
right.
gentle on you.
Yeah.
Right, it's nice.
Little nudges.
It'll say, oh, you should probably stand now.
I love when it says, it looks like you had red wine or alcohol last night.
Yes, I did.
Yes.
How do you, like, what's the secret to sustaining a great marriage when you're traveling the whole freaking time and it's just really intense?
Yeah, it's certainly a challenge. I have to say that as my career wore on and our eldest had to go to school finally, eventually at some point they got to check in for school. And then the little one, we have two, and our youngest, Lydia, came along, and my family's ability to travel changed. That put a strain on us, and I didn't last the full-time circuit much longer after that. It's when I was like, you know what? I've accomplished what I've wanted to. I've chased 8 for a period of time. I want to be with my family. And my wife and I were very intentional when we wanted to try to start our family and wait till I was further into my career, because when I get into something, I am so focused and on it. My wife has an art gallery in North Carolina and is very focused and runs her own business as well. And thankfully she's had great flexibility in her schedule and great commitment to helping me, do what I need to and have wanted to. But when kids came along, it really made that tough. Not that I was experiencing any pressure from her, but just on my own heart. Like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to be away from my family.
Was it tough getting team ownership through?
No, it's my headspace as a team owner is so different than it was as a driver. I don't have to train, spend time with engineers, be in the simulator, recover, massage, be in bed at an early time. Like my schedule is so much different now, and I'm such a different, more relaxed person. I think I was a real pain in the ass to be around for a long time, because I was just so hyper-focused on all the things that I needed to do, and now I'm just different.
As an athlete and as the best in your business, you do have to be selfish if you want to win.
Yes.
And sleep at this time, eat at this time, focus here. It's not particularly collaborative, bluntly.
Right. Totally right.
But the trade-off is often, when we speak to athletes, is then what happens post-career.
Yeah.
And that's where it's interesting now, you go back into it.
Well, the trade-off is $40 million a year. Fuck. I'm straight and I'll marry him. But no. My question to you is, what's the most lavish purchase that you spent on in the crazy times?
I bought a couple boats, just lake boats. I bought a boat that was do you know what pickle fork is? Boat, like a catamaran race boat.
Yeah.
So I bought one of those and owned it for 2 weeks and almost flipped the thing over. I almost died in it, like at 130 miles an hour in this damn thing.
You survived 20 plus years.
It'd be a real bummer, wouldn't it?
Put it on the trailer and sent it back to the dealership. Did you? Come pick it up, guys. I almost died. So it's amazing how much value it lost in the 2 weeks that it was in my possession. That was a dumb purchase. But
how much was it?
It was a lot at the time, but it was probably 150,000. It was right when I first got started, so it wasn't overly lavish, but relevant to the bank account, it was considerable.
Excessive.
Return the next week for 15,000.
Right. I would say probably dwellings. Bought a place in New York, had a great apartment there for a long time. Have a place in Colorado and stuff like that we've been able to kind of sit in and enjoy. Those would be the lavish ones.
And now London.
Which we didn't buy here. We've just rented. But to live a parallel life and still have our U.S. assets, it's not cheap over here.
What do you find the weirdest thing about the way Brits do operate, live?
I don't know if there's anything. Well, some words I get wrong. Fanny to us in the States is something way different than over here, and I've learned the hard way.
I was not expecting that.
But maybe I shouldn't say that.
No,
Sorry.
it's
See,
fine.
I'm still not used to it being like
It's
that
fine.
offensive.
I was not expecting that. Like,
thumbnail.
you all take shoes off in the US. Very strange.
What?
When you go to someone's house in the US, you take your shoes off.
We would in our apartment in New York, and I try to here just because the streets are used for bathrooms. But in our place in North Carolina, I don't. Like dogs and everything, and they pee and poo everywhere, man.
A friend of mine said about San Francisco, it's the only city in the world where a dog will feasibly step in human shit. So I'm not going to have that about London.
It's not that part, it's the dog part. And I have a dog that's out there all the time. And I clean his paws
Nice,
on the
of
way in. I'm like, come here, buddy. Clean those things up.
We have better food.
Which is crazy to think.
We do.
Yeah.
Way fresher food.
Fresher, yes.
can't
We
go
shop-
Fresher. No one's arguing with that.
It's funny coming
better.
over here. Everyone was like, "Oh, you're gonna hate the food." And granted, we're in London where there's such great food. It's been awesome. The food's been incredible.
Yeah.
And from a fresh standpoint, completely different.
So much fresher.
We shop once every 2 or 3 days. We just walk down the street and hit our local spot and go back. Where in the States, bulk shopping, not the case. The love of sausage in this
Yeah,
country.
we love sausage.
Wow.
So Fanny's got a new meaning, and you guys all love sausage.
Do you not like?
I walked right into that one.
Do you not like sausage?
This is what a title for the show. I found out what Fanny meant, and you love sausage.
I told a friend of mine we were skinning up the mountain of Verbier because the snow wasn't great, and we're all skinning up. And my friend's wife had a fanny pack on. And I said, "That's a lovely fanny pack." And she looked at me and she said, "Do you know what you just said to me?" I'm like, not a clue.
But it is.
Yeah.
That is what it's called.
From a nation that loves hot dogs, that's fascinating.
Can they be classed as sausage?
Hot dogs?
Yeah.
I don't know.
But bangers and mash?
Bangers and mash.
That's phenomenal.
Yeah.
Oh, with
Phenomenal.
onion gravy.
That's
Oh.
fantastic.
Yeah, I agree with you. Right. What's your final one?
I don't have one.
You don't have a final one?
No, I'm so caught up. I'm flustered.
You're flustered by
Sorry.
sausage and fannies. Right, we'll leave him.
So,
he's just had a baby. He's
what's
not used to such excitement.
Yeah, that's true.
We'll talk about it later, Charlie. He'll come back again soon, Charlie. Back to hockey. I mean NASCAR. Sorry. Final one for you. When you look forward to the next 10 years, what do you most want to achieve? When you sit down and go, you know what, I'd love to be able to say I conquered this. What's the next I conquered?
That's a great question. I've never built anything, and I feel like I'm building something right now. I was able to be a part of many great teams and great systems and franchises and their brands, but we now have a chance to build that all ourselves. And stepping into this opportunity, I've always had a vision about the bigger play and the brand and racing in multiple championships, not just NASCAR, but of course being as strong as we can in NASCAR and expanding to the right limits there. But then is there a chance in IndyCar, sports car, off-road racing? There's a lot of different offerings within the motorsports world that are super cool and can help build this brand. And so it's that journey of building something that I've never done this before. And I'm partnered with people that are excited to build and see the same opportunity out there that I do.
Listen, Jimmy, I don't think we've ever managed to fit so many sexual references into a short 5-minute segment. Dude, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much for joining us.
Loved it. Appreciate it, guys.